Locked in the bunker, shadows shake. One man clapping secrets awake. Board games living, dice they break. Echoes pounding, hearts they quake. In the bunker, board games rolling. One man clapping, stories growing. Hard rock thunder, speakers blowing. Clapping loud, the unknown sound.
Welcome to the sound of one man clapping. I am the one man coming to you live from the bunker. Well, live for me. You're getting this canned garbage like the auditory equivalent of secondhand smoke. It's probably not very good for you, but you love it anyway. This is a podcast about board gaming culture, and growing old gracelessly, something I do with pride. Today we're wriggling our way into prefrontal cortex with mindless ramblings, coming to you direct from the hole I live in. With all the games that we're going to talk about what's coming in with incoming! 4 exclamation marks as always. We'll hit the crowdfunding vibes with FOMOMOFO and breeze through voices in my head before giving someone the clap. Now on with the show. This week with the games that were, it wasn't a big game for volume, but it was a big game for big game. Let me tell you. I really only played 2 games. The first one I got to the table this week was Stefan Feld's new magnum opus, Civolution. Civolution is a beast of a game. If you're thinking this is another Castles of Burgundy or other sort of light decision-based dice chucker, you would be so wrong you're going to go around the wrong dial twice, back to wrong the second time. Civolution, the box is about 4.5 kilos, so it's a heavy box. It is packed full of stuff. There's a wild player board that if you look at it and you're thinking, what is going on here? It looks like a computer console. And when you get into the theme of the game, that starts to make sense. I mean, it never makes sense. It doesn't make sense. But it will make sense within the theme of the game, so much as there's a theme of the game. So in Civolution, you are essentially in an academy, a locked room, an escape. I don't know where you are. But you are running a computer simulation. You're running a computer simulation for the evolution of a civilization. Huzzah! Civolution! And that's why your player board looks like some sort of computer panel out of a 1968 science fiction movie. It's very blocky. It's got all these weird steps in it. It's got 17 trillion recesses in it. And in setting the game up, it became clear why. I played this solo, so it was about, I'm going to be honest, it was about 3.5 hours of playing with myself, and that's not because it's a 3.5 hour game, but I was doing a self-teach from the rulebook, which it can be a real punish, learning from the rulebook. There were no videos at the time. My favorite man in the world, Paul Grogan, finally has a video out, came out last week for Civolution. I haven't watched it yet because I've already played the game. I will be watching it to find out where I maybe didn't step rightly, as happens in your first game on a big heavy thing like this. And I believe his video comes in at almost an hour. So it would make it one of the longest video teaches that he's done. I think Voidfall was 42 minutes, and that was a long video. I think he was saying the week before last that Civolution coming out is going to be nearly an hour, and I can understand why. Civolution, let me not bury the lead, Civolution is excellent. It's really excellent. And it is absolutely worth the grist that you got to go through to really understand where you're going with this. So you have a board in the middle of the table that is basically, it's a simulated continent. It's a continent, and it has different spaces in it, different biomes, really. You've got plains and trees and whatever else, and they're represented by different colors and slightly different textures and models, whatever the case is. And mountainous ranges happen to be slightly dual layered, which is a nice touch. And all over these biomes are little spaces where you can poop out little workers, bloop, and out they go. And you're trying to have the greatest, most evolved civilization by the end of the game. So I now know how to play, and by know how to play, I know how to put one turn after the other until the game is over. I have no idea how to win, but I do know how to take turns. So, I mean, that's something to start after 3.5 hours, but let me see if I can talk you through it. You have, you start the game off with 5 dice, or 6, 5 white dice, and 1 pink die. And the pink die is a fate die, which comes in later for a push your luck. And you have 5 categories of actions on the right side of your board. and they are loosely grouped by one has to do with population, one has to do with advancing your population, one has to do with different actual actions and activities you can take. And so each dice sits in a column. You start off with your dice, say 5, it's 6 dice. And they're all, at the start of the game, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each column has a die with a number facing up, and you start off with one of each, which opens your game up with a million choices. Because within that side, and this is the right-hand side of the player board, you have something like 24 action spaces. So on your turn, you're going to choose one of those action spaces and do whatever's in the action space. And so the action space might, for example, be procreate. So you're going to choose that space, and then you're going to take one of your dudes, and you're going to pop it out in a biome where you have another dude. This represents your little tribe's breeding. Great. They're having fun. They're having little meeple under the sun moments when no one's looking, and boop, out pops a baby meeple. There are no baby meeples. It'd be really cool if there were. It's a baby meeple. It grows into a granddad meeple, maybe even one that dies. That'd be a great mechanic. I'm not lying to have sort of an evolution of that, but it isn't. So you choose procreate, and your meeple goes out, and that's your turn done. And it goes around the table, and to be honest, I think once you know this game, these turns are going to be really quick, and this is where it shares a little bit of DNA with Castles of Burgundy, because you're going to take your dice, and you're going to use them to choose your action. Much like in Castles of Burgundy, if you have a 5, you're going to take an item from a 5, or you're going to place it on a hex with a 5. If you haven't played Castles of Burgundy, that makes no sense to you whatsoever. But your die gives you a multitude of different actions you could do out on the board. In Civolution, you've got your dice also choosing actions on your player board, and I'm going to drill down into that in a minute, because there's a deeper sort of twist to this. And you go around the table, it comes back to you, and then you might say, well, I want to migrate now. So you're going to take your dice, and you're going to pop them on the migrate space, and then your place where you have 2 meeples, one of them's going to go doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. He's going to walk to the place next door and settle in a camp. And so you're now spreading out. Spreading out gives you access to different resources, because all the mountainous areas might have, for example, coal and iron, and I don't remember. There are a lot. Let me be clear. There are 18, 19, 20 different resources in this game, because you've got 18 resources, and you've got gold, and you've got food. There are 20 resources. Okay, that sounds ludicrously bonkers when you say that out loud. There are 20 resources to manage and 24 actions that you can possibly take. So if you've got someone in your world that has AP, you may want to leave this one in the box, because this will break them. This will literally break them. But realistically, it's going to come around to you. You're going to choose your action, and the board state will change, because each of the biomes has a limited number of camp spaces. You are really limited in where you can go at the start of the game, because everyone starts in the same 2 biomes, and we move out from there. But here's where the grist is on the action choice. To take an action, you have to use 2 dice. So you start with 6 dice. There are ways to get more dice. It's quite expensive, because it literally burns your whole turn. And if you don't get 2 more dice, the point of getting extra dice, I mean, there is a point, but it's like it gives you an extra action unless you can grab 2 spare dice. You've got to put 2 dice out. So in the 5 column, I'll use the 6 column because I can remember that. In the column that has the 6 die at the start of the game, that's how you get new cards, research new technologies, because there are cards in this game as well, and you have to play these cards. You've got to play a 6, and then there are 6 rows from top down where you have to play another die 1 through 5. Sorry, there are 5 rows 1 through 5. So you might have to play a 1 and a 6. Will allow you to place your dice in the top action space, which gets you, for example, the orange card, which might be a new technology that is in the farming area, whatever it is. I'm going to get this wrong because I've only played it the once. Or if you play a 6 and a 3, you get to choose from the mutations deck. So you get a mutation where your civilization grows horns, and there's benefits to that. Each of these cards gives your civilization a different benefit. Anyway, you've got to play 2 dice. So in Castles of Burgundy, you're playing 2 dice, but that gives you 2 actions. In Civolution, you're playing 2 dice, and that gives you 1 action. And so you might have 2 2s, a 3, a 4, and a 5, and a 6 on your board. And between them, you can actually choose from 16 of the 24 possible actions. That's an example. I haven't mathed that. But that just gives you an idea of how crazy the capabilities are in this game. You also have resources that allow you to mitigate your dice, to move them up or down. And you also have resources that can create or take the place of a wild die. So if you only have a 6 and you really need something else, you have what's called a focus token, and you can drop that in, and it takes place of any die you like. They are wicked expensive to get, but they're worth having and worth holding on to. So Civolution, 24 spaces. There's more. And I'm not going to explain the whole game because we would be here literally all day. It would take me 9 hours to do what Paul Grogan can do in an hour. You can also, if you have 2 6s, you can spend them to increase one of the traits of your civilization. So your civilization might have the ability to debate and elocute beautifully, or they might have intelligence. So if you spend 2 3s, you increase your intelligence and whatnot. And this is where playing cards comes in, because cards will all have minimum thresholds. Not only will you have to spend resources to play certain cards of your 18 possible resources, but you will have to have minimum thresholds of development for your civilization. This is bonkers in the most delightful way. This is not going to be for everyone. You know, I've tracked quite a few reviews out there where people have played Civolution and they've just gone, nope. It's not there. And it's not that they're being quite scathing. I don't think most people who play it doesn't work for them. They're just saying, this doesn't work for me. I have read 1 or 2 posts where people have gone, this game is garbage. And opinions like assholes. Everyone's got one, right? And that's fine. I don't begrudge anyone their opinion. Circling back to the 18 resources, you are clearly not going to be stockpiling and managing 18 different resources. You're going to look at the actions you want to do. And each of the decks of cards and whatnot are loosely themed around, 1 or 2 different resources. So you're going to have to specialize, because there is no meaningful way for you to farm and obtain 18 resources before the end of the game. So you might be working on 6 or 7 resources, and that's it. And the other people on the table, there'll be overlap, and it doesn't matter. If I'm chasing wool, it doesn't stop Super Trooper from getting wool, because he's got to have his own little farm or his own little presence in the region that has wool. And we can both have presence in that region. Doesn't matter. So when it comes to competing for resources, there is none. There's no competition for resources. So long as you have a presence in the biome where that resource is, you can produce and collect those resources. There's no way to stomp someone out of an area, which is nice. It means that in a game this deep in planning, you're never going to be blocked out of, I need that gold. No one else can stop me from getting the gold. They're not going to grab the gold and then I'm screwed for 2 or 3 turns. Not that I can see. Anyway, I don't see that that's a possibility. However, this is a game of push and pull. This is a seesaw with strategy on one side and tactics on the other, because what the board's doing will meaningfully affect what you're planning to do. In that, if a biome is full, you can get in there. You can actually get in there and you can bump someone out of a campsite. That doesn't mean that they can't succeed in there. It just means that you've got the capability to get extra benefits. But also, if you're chasing gold, there might not be any gold on the board. There might be 0 gold, because you don't know what each biome has for a resource until somebody has entered it and basically explored it. So you've got these biomes, and the mountain biomes might have gold, iron, and copper, and coal. I'm going to get this wrong because I don't have the resource in front of me. It's an example. But each of those biomes starts with their resource face down. And until somebody, grows the cojones to reach out into that area and flip over the hidden token and go, oh, well, here's Jade. I wasn't expecting Jade. Now I have to pivot because I can use Jade, but I wasn't planning to use Jade. And to top that off, in between each biome is another thing you can explore. There are these octagonal areas that drop between the different continents on the board. And as an action, you can choose to flip over anything that's connected to where you are. And these introduce meaningful shifts to the game. So there might be a volcano in one. And if a volcano is exposed, it immediately destroys all settlements in all adjacent biomes. And you can never place a settlement there again. You could flip over a cave. And there are 2 caves on the board. And they're like wormholes. Any area that's touching a cave is immediately adjacent to any other area that's touching a cave. You do have to find the other cave, because you can't just travel through a cave and pop out the other side. We've got to find the other side of the cave first. So this is a game of exploration. It's a game of deep tactical analysis of the board. you have to have a strategy. If you have no strategy, and let me be clear, I have no strategy in this game. I have played one solo game, so I have a basic, fundamental understanding of the game. So you have to have a strategy. You have cards at the start of the game that you've got to look at, and you've got to say, well, what's my plan with these cards? And you won't have one. You're going to play your first game, and I don't have a plan. I have no idea. I see this card needs Jade. I see over there, maybe I can get Jade. So I'm going to hold on to this card. Civolution is excellent. And I think Civolution is going to be one of those games that becomes superb after about 4 plays or 5 plays. And I also think, unfortunately, Civolution is going to suffer the drawback of experienced players playing with inexperienced players, because it's the kind of game that your first game is pretty much a write-off. Your first game is spent just understanding the game. And I get why that's not for everybody. I don't know what it's on. I think it's 4.4 or so on BGG, maybe 4.3. It's kind of how it feels when I played it. I'm talking about game weight. I can absolutely understand why some people play this and go, you can stick it, because your first game is going to take you twice as long as well, because you're really trying to understand where all the levers are on your board, and they are everywhere. You have levers everywhere on your board. And so, as I said, I played a solo game, which I imagine a solo game would probably take me about 75 minutes to play, maybe a little longer, which for me is a real sweet spot. You set it up, and out of the box, if you pack Civolution away properly, there's very little setup. It comes out of the box, and it's almost preset ready to go, which is amazing. When you see the player boards, they hold all these recessed little chips in them, and you fold them up, and they go away ready to play the next time, which is amazing. And if you haven't played Civolution, you're like, Hammers, this makes no sense. I don't know what you're talking about. You're rambling. Go get a coffee and come back when you're making sense. Trust me, if you pack this away properly, setup is 10, 12 minutes at most, and to set up and then play a 75-minute solo game is great. And I think to play a first 2-player game, when I get Super Trooper or somebody to the table, I would say a first game is probably 2 hours, but I would say subsequent games would be about 90 minutes. And to me, that's great, because on a game day, it means we can get through 3 or 4 games if there's just 2 of us. I will reiterate, this game is not for everybody. And certainly if you have any AP when you're playing, this is something that's going to give you brain pain in a very real way. The theme is the theme. Like, it's you've got a computer board and you're doing a civilization. I actually think the theme's integrated reasonably well. I could have done without the computer board, and something that was a little more maybe godlike would be more fun, rather than, well, we're in a computer simulation, but whatever. Because you are also slotting cards into your board at the top. I'm not even going to go down that road, because the way you slot your cards in gives you in-game points, and if you slot in a row, you get a new income chip. There's all kinds of income chips and goals, and there's a million things I haven't talked about that bring this game, to a level of depth that I actually think the level of depth of choice in this game is probably amongst the most I've ever seen in a game. And if you take something like Voidfall, which is entirely deterministic, the number of choices you have in Voidfall, I think there are 21 actions in Voidfall, but there's 6 resources you have to manage, and you also have the board state, which you've got to grok and integrate into every sort of turn. This, and I'm talking about Civolution, has a broader set of choices, but this is where the dice come in to their own, in that once you've taken your 3 actions, you've got a reset where you grab your 6 dice and you roll them again, and those slot into the individual columns. So if you roll 3 2s and a 4 and 2 5s, that's what you have to work with. So it's not as deterministic by far as something like Voidfall, because Voidfall, you've just got a selection of actions in your hand, you've got cards, and as you play those cards, the number of actions you can choose from in the cycle reduces and reduces and reduces until the cycle resets. In Civolution, you will have a limited number of choices from those 24 actions based on what you roll. And as I said, there are tokens that allow you to mitigate the dice. There are cards that will allow you to mitigate your dice that come out later in the game. But I think that struggle of, well, this is what I've got. This is what I have to work with. How can I unpick these 6 dice to the best possible turn? It almost has that Arcs feel, where, Arcs, and you're playing the trick-taking cards, and you draw your 6 cards for the round, and that's what you've got. And you've got to somehow find a pattern in there that you can work with. I think Civolution has the potential to be a top 10 game for me. I don't know, but I think it has the potential. after 3 or 4 or 5 more plays to really take a place sort of in the top 10 realm. It won't be top 5, maybe it'll be top 20, but it is certainly something that I can see having an extensive, long life of play, because having 2 plays the same would be almost impossible. Because what I haven't mentioned is you also are drafting different starting cards at the start of the game. So Civolution is wild. I know how to play. How to win, I have no idea. And to be honest, if I don't work out how to win in 10 games, I don't even care. Because I think the decision space is so clever. The production is off the charts. The insert that comes with it is great. I know I touched on that last week when we were on Incoming. I think Civolution is superb. So hats off to Stefan Feld and the team. It's not better than Castles of Burgundy. It's an entirely different type of game. I would like to play Castles of Burgundy any day of the week, and you can play Castles of Burgundy with just about anyone. Anyone can enjoy Castles of Burgundy. It's that kind of game. Not just anyone is going to enjoy Civolution, but the people that do are going to really enjoy Civolution. So as I said at the top of this segment, I didn't play a lot of games, but I played some really, really big games from a game caliber and a game weight, so to speak. And the second of only 2 games that I played this week, saddle up, Super Trooper and I started our Aeon Trespass campaign. Yeah, Thursday nights, on the nights we've got available, we both finish work reasonably early, so we've got the opportunity to sit down for 4 or 5 hours on Thursday nights, and we have started Aeon Trespass. So, Aeon Trespass Odyssey. Whoa, wow, wee wah. What? Okay, we've only had 1 session. And what we did was we managed to work our way through the tutorial, which I think was quite good. The tutorial itself is fairly on rails. And we kind of ditched the rails pretty quick into the tutorial. We're both fairly clever gamers and experienced and grok rules pretty reasonably. And Super Trooper had managed to watch, I think, all 4 of Paul Grogan's videos up until that point. I'd only made it through 1.5, which I thought, that'll be fine. That'll get me through the first session. No, it won't. No, it won't. It won't get me through the first session, but that's okay, because I had a great time. I'm not going to get down into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay for this, because, again, Aeon Trespass is the kind of game that is aimed at a very small niche of people. It's one of those games that, I mean, there's some people out there on the circuit, and I'm talking about influencers or people in our industry that talk a lot like I do. And not that I'm influential, but I talk a lot. That have said this is basically the hardest game you will ever play. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it's probably one of the most complex games that I've ever seen, and I've by no means seen every game on the planet. It shares a lot of DNA with Kingdom Death Monster, surely. I think it's a little more serious. I've only played Kingdom Death once, and it has a real sort of... It has a real vibe of, with undertones of humor, and there's a lot of sexual humor in it, and it's... I can see the appeal. I think ATO for me is going to be a better suited game. One, I love that sort of Greek mythology bit, and Aeon Trespass takes place in an alternate reality where the gods have been murdered by the rise up of these primordials, and it's our job to now sweep through the lands, eliminating the primordials that killed the gods. So, holy moly, hold on. And allegedly, or reportedly, the first 3 cycles of the game have something like 250 to 300 hours of gameplay. I can believe it, but at the same time, we'll see. I'd like to see as much of this game as possible, just based on what I know of it so far. So we played the tutorial, and then we played our first sort of real turns, where we traveled around a little bit, and then we got into our first proper fight. This is a boss battler. We got into our first proper fight, and it was actually looking pretty good for a while. I mean, not to bury the lead, we got destroyed in the end. And when I say destroyed, we had to get 10 wounds on the boss. By the time 3 of our 4 titans were dead, we still had to get 2 wounds, and that's a very precarious place to be. And Super Trooper was the last man standing. He managed to get 1 of those wounds, so we had 1 to go. And then he died. But did you die? Yes, we died. This is a game where you're going to die a lot. And when I say died, you're basically piloting these titans. Your characters don't die. It's a little Avatar-esque in that we're piloting these 30-foot-tall titans into battle with these primordials. It's a very clever notion. And I actually look back on the game we played last Thursday, and I can see where being the first game, not that we made mistakes, but perhaps I personally was a little cavalier with the dice. I'm like, well, I'm going to chuck these dice, and this is what we're going to do. And to be honest, in your first battle, your options, it's not that they're limited, but you don't have a ton of options in that very limited weapons. You've got very limited in the way of armor and whatnot. You've got a very limited in the way of what your special abilities are. Look, we did die. And we've just made the executive decision that it's the first battle of the game. It's not like we've played the game a lot. We're actually going to replay that battle and treat it as sort of tutorial 2.0 and just wind back and do it again. It's not that big a deal. All that happens is you lose your 4 titans. You have plenty of titans in your ship. If you lose a battle, you lose 4 titans. You read some text. There are some penalties for losing a battle. And you move on and you keep going. But I think for Super Trooper and I, it's not that we're perfectionists or we have to win every time, but we're going to take this opportunity to learn the battle sequence better. And so we're just going to we're going to rewind and we're going to redo this battle with all the same stats and everything. We're not going to gamify it or anything, but we're basically just going to take a redo, and we're okay with that. It's not. We had something called a Sisyphus tier, which is a special resource that you could basically, everyone have a sip of this, and we all go back in time and you redo the battle without penalties. Given it's literally the first thing we did in the game was we traversed one tile and then we entered this battle, we're pretty happy to just wind it back and go again, because in the end, we got pretty close. We only had 1 wound left to get, and I think if we had been a little more experienced on how to mitigate the dice, a little more experienced on how to use the resources at our disposal, I think we would have had that. And to top it all off, because the game hadn't been fully unpacked, really, I just kind of opened it up and got everything out and got it ready for the tutorial. It took us a long time to sort of siphon through everything. Every time it said, pull this card, sometimes it took us 5 or 6 minutes to find the card. In fact, there was one card we couldn't find at all, and I just made a note of it to find it later. Now that that's all been sorted properly, I've got a couple of token boxes and I bought a card box for it and got it all sorted. We'll be able to get through that much faster. And I'm very much looking forward to round 2. I still have a fair bit of painting to go. We were playing with half-painted minis, which makes the game only very borderline playable. And I think Super Trooper actually said we lost because they weren't painted, which is fair. We made the distraction of the minis that had only been based and primed perfectly reasonable, so we'll blame the minis and we will start again. There's some really clever mechanics in Aeon Trespass. And I think I'm not going to focus on, it is an incredibly complex game with a 90-page manual, but one of the things I want to just touch on, if you don't know anything about Aeon Trespass, is they have this mechanic which they are carrying through, they being Into the Unknown, which is the development and publishing studio, called the Inverted Combat Paradigm. And what that means is that battle kind of works backwards. And what I mean by that is, instead of the boss getting weaker and weaker as you go, every time you wound it, it gets angrier and more powerful. You swap in stronger cards. So as you go through the battle, this bad guy gets badder, and badder in like really wicked ways. And the flip side of that is, so do we. So every time you make an attack, you go up 1 in your rage. Your titans are barely controlled. They're like Mr. Furious from Mystery Men. They're barely controlled powder kegs of rage. And every time you swing your weapon, every time you make an attack, they get a little angrier. And the angrier you get, the more bonuses you get, in that you get rerolls, you get extra dice, to the point where by the time you have rage, 6, 7, and 8, you've got some pretty wild stuff going on. And I think that's where, I know me personally, I'll be using those sort of capabilities smarter and better and possibly even more correctly, which I think will swing the tide of the battle. I am always the eternal optimist, but I think our second battle against this POS that we fought is going to go very differently, because I understand the battle system more. And getting your rage up is a really good thing. Unfortunately, if you get your rage to 9 and you need to attack again, your Titan explodes basically in rage, and it is no good to you. In this game, however, Titans are semi-disposable. So if you go past 9, you're out basically. Which means that in a combat, your Titan or your Argonaut who's piloting the Titan is only going to get 9 turns of fighting. Sometimes if you've been pushed back a number of squares, you have to spend a whole turn trying to get back in the fight. But every time you fight, every time you swing your weapons, that rage goes up. So you're really only getting 9 goes. I think you can get a 10th go, but you're going to die. And that's really interesting. That combat mechanic of, well, everyone gets stronger through the battle, not weaker. I like it. I mean, I've only played it once, but I like it. And it's very different. And I know that they're carrying, they, again, being Into the Unknown, are carrying that mechanic through into Enormity, which is their up-and-coming release, which is going to hit crowdfunding in about 2 weeks. I'm very keen to see what that holds, because that looks like it's basically going to be Aeon Trespass meets Nemesis. It takes place in space with ships and aliens, blah, blah, blah. It's probably another $500 I don't need to spend, but it can be played true solo as well, as my understanding. So I'm going to be very keenly looking at Enormity because I like this combat system. Big thanks out to Paul Grogan for his 5 videos, but also to the Esoteric Order of Gaming. The Esoteric Order of Gaming is an online presence that does exceptional player aids for games, and they've done a player aid for ATO that distills 80 pages of manual down to, I think, 8 or 9 pages of really condensed, really concise, very, very directed notes. So I hadn't had time to laminate those, but I'll be laminating those, and we'll have those on the table. And very much looking forward to a second round. And as I said to Super Trooper when we finished on Thursday, it's only 396 hours to go. And those 2 games, whoa, big games, were the games that were.
Boxes on the doorstep, new delights inside. Heaven's on fire, fields to divide.
And now we're here with incoming! 4 exclamation marks. I don't have any actual delivery notifications, so to Pete, my postman, I'm sorry. You're going to have to continue asking, would you like fries with that? And explaining to people, unfortunately, that the ice cream machine is broken because your workload is way, way, way down. However, I do have 3 things that are due imminently. I would expect shipping notifications anytime in the next sort of 24 hours to week. I'm eagerly awaiting Undaunted 2200 Callisto. I'm very much looking forward to that. The solo on that looks aggressively challenging, but also fantastic. I have been lucky enough to pre-order SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which I really like the look of. Very, very excited to see that come to the table potentially, because as a Euro, it is much more tactical than strategic, and I enjoy playing tactical Euros because it means I can get through a game with Dusty in about 2 hours, because it forces him to think only 1 or 2 steps ahead rather than 6 or 7. And I love playing tactical things with him. So I'm looking forward to getting that to the table. And any day now, and I do mean any day now, because shipping notifications for this, I expect are going to come with very little notice, for the simple reason that there's so much anticipation, so much hype around this, and it is coming from Aetherworks, is Betrayal of the Second Era, the Elder Scrolls chip theory game. That is literally due any day. It is... Chip Theory is very cagey about the movement of the ships and the shipping containers, because they're doing wave by wave shipping. They're not loading up everything and sending it to the US. They're not loading up everything and sending it to Australia. They are sending, as copies of the game are ready, they're sending one shipping container to the port and off it goes. And so my understanding is they're staging that. So Australia's container might be on the water. Australia's container might be the last one they ship. Strategically, that would be good for them because things get to Australia much, much faster. So I don't know, but I'm wildly hopeful that Betrayal of the Second Era is going to be here any day now, because I love me some Elder Scrolls, and it looks superb. That'll do it for incoming this week. There's, as I said, nothing on the horizon in the mailbox, but lots on the way. Woo! FOMOMOFO is ridiculous this week. Yeah. So, as always, let's start off with this disclaimer. This is not a comprehensive list, but rather those campaigns that are of particular interest to me, either because they fill a niche in my collection, they're from a game publisher whose content I love, or they have great toys, or sometimes all 3. We love it when it's all 3. FOMOMOFO crowdfunding this week. Oof, this is a right fisting to the wallet this week. We're going to talk about 3 games this week that I am very much interested in seeing how they unfold. And the first one is the latest from Shadowborn Games. Shadowborn brought us Oathsworn a couple of years ago. I have Oathsworn. It's on the counter. I've played the first 3 scenarios in Oathsworn, and I've decided to reset it and shelve it to enjoy it with the gaming group because it plays really well solo. Like, really well solo. But the narrative and the gameplay and the decision space seems really excellent. And I would say, I mean, Oathsworn's had a lot of accolades over the last 2 years. And from my limited experience in those first 3 scenarios, it deserves every accolade it gets. So Oathsworn is sitting there. But Shadowborn is bringing a new game, a game very different to Oathsworn, to crowdfunding that started just this week, called Avalon the Riven Vale. So Avalon the Riven Vale is basically Arthurian Blood Rage, and I don't mean that as a diss in any way. I mean that as a compliment. Blood Rage is a triumph of gaming. You know, it's several years old now. I will play Blood Rage anytime. We don't get Blood Rage to the table very often, and I'm going to circle back to that comment in about 5 or 6 minutes. But Avalon the Riven Vale is an area control game in which you have a board that is set up blind, in that it's set up upside down. Segments of it are set up upside down. And as you move into each segment, it gets flipped over. Not an unusual sort of concept. And you can do things on that. There are things you can do in that space, including build settlements. This is an area control game, so it involves combat. And there's a combat system that I like that has a bit of Oathsworn's DNA. We'll come back to it. But after each cycle or season, and everyone's put their armies out, anything that doesn't have a settlement on it is the pieces that don't have settlements on come out of the board, they get flipped over, they get shuffled and placed back in. So you have these Mists of Avalon, which take over the board in between each season, which then you have no idea what you're in front of. You have no idea what's surrounding you. And I think that's really clever. I think it's really interesting in that you then have to re-explore and see what's there. And it's this shifting realm that you have to continually re-explore. And obviously, by the time you get to the 3rd season, there will be less pieces that are coming out because settlements come out. Once the settlement's out, it locks that piece in. It doesn't come out again. But it looks really interesting. The combat as well. The combat has a real push your luck. And this is where, you can see a little bit of the DNA from Oathsworn. Oathsworn had decks of cards that could replace your dice. You could go either way with them, dice or cards. But with the deck of cards, you were flipping cards over as a modifier during your combat. And at a certain point, you would be out. And it went badly for you. The combat in Avalon, the Riven Vale, you're going to play a combat card. It's going to have a combat number on the bottom. And that combat number might be 11. And then you've got these decks of cards, and you're going to flip cards over one at a time. And so if you flip the first card over and it's 5, that's great. You can go in with combat 5. Because the 11 on the card you played is the maximum potential power you're going into battle with. So you go, yep, I'm going to flip another one. You grab another card, you flip it over. That says 4. So you are now at 9 combat power. Awesome. I have a potential of 11. I have 9. You can go, yep, I'm going with 9. Or you can look at the board state and go, that's not going to work for me. You flip another card over and it's a 2. That brings you to your full 11. You're going with 11 power. It's like, huzzah! I gamed the game. However, if you draw a 3 and you're already at 9, you go to 12, you bust. And what that means is you can only go into combat with 50% of the power of the combat card you initially played. Okay, so this is almost giving me Wonderland's War vibes with the bag draw, with the exception that you know what's in your bag in Wonderland's War. I'm not sure how easy it is to track what's in these decks for pushing your luck, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it. I like it. I really like the way it sounds. The deluxe edition of this game, look, you can buy the non-deluxe version. I could buy the non-deluxe version. And we're going to talk about another crowdfunding in FOMOMOFO today where I'm actually considering buying the base version of the game. And I'll talk about why when I get there. But Avalon the Riven Vale, when you go look it up, these armies that you have, the minis for the armies, are spectacularly gorgeous. They are just eye-wateringly, butthole-clenchingly, goose-bumply, tingly in the extremities gorgeous. I mean, I'm not messing around. And then you've got different creatures that you can win to your side that are gorgeous. You've got the Holy Grail in Excalibur that you can upgrade to chunky metal. You get a proper metal Excalibur and a metal Holy Grail and metal things. The deluxe edition of this game is $210 Australia. That's fine. I'm not being funny. $210 Australia for a game that looks like it's got this level of production. It's got this level of attention to detail. It's coming from a pedigree. Now, granted, Shadowborn Games' pedigree is in a narrative-driven campaign game, not in an area control, troops on a map style game. So there's that to consider. But they do have a pedigree in delivering. I have no doubt this game's going to come. I have no doubt that it's going to come in the format that they say it's going to come. Here's where I have a niggling sort of annoyance. The deluxe edition isn't the deluxe edition, because the deluxe edition, you can then pay more to get washed minis. They're calling them misted, whatever the case is, because you know it's Mists of Avalon, and you can pay more to get the sleeves, and you can pay more to get the metal upgrades. So it's like a partly deluxe edition. It's like Lux, but if you want deluxe, it's another. I think the metallic pieces are another $40. The sleeves are another $20. The washing's another $35. I might have those wrong, and to be honest, in and of each of those upgrades, I think they're perfectly reasonable. I think charging $30 to wash all these beautiful minis is a perfectly reasonable thing. What I guess is I'm taking a very small first world problem exception to is calling it the deluxe edition when it's not the deluxe edition. There are base editions that come with less minis, less components, that sort of thing. But your deluxe edition is $210. If you want all the other upgrades, it's about another $90. So all of a sudden you're at $300. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. If it's a game of the kind of caliber, I am sure that if you wind back the economy to when Blood Rage came out, it was a similar price for all the stuff. Super Trooper has everything Blood Rage. He has like the Blood Rage shipping container, and it's beautiful to play. You get everything out the map, and you get everything out. It's beautiful to play. I actually don't have any doubt that the production quality of this game and what you actually get is going to achieve a $300 outlay. I don't doubt it. Shadowborn, the Oathsworn production quality was excellent. I guess I just am winding back to this whole notion that, well, if you're going to sell me a deluxe edition, sell me a deluxe edition for $300 and call the other edition the uber fancy pants, but not quite fancy pantsy enough for Hamas of OMC edition. Shipping's $40, so $40 on, and that's shipping whether you get the upgrades or not, basically. So it's $40 on 210, which if you are tracking sort of my metric for shipping, that's a 20% shipping accounting. So it's 20% of the base game. If you take it as part of the 300, you're talking 1/7. So you're down to something more like, I can't do 1/7. I know 1/6 is 16.7%, but it's going to be less than 16.7%. It's probably be something around 13-14%. I think that's okay. It's coming in 2 huge boxes if you get everything, and I actually think $40 shipping for a game of this size is perfectly reasonable. Here's now my argument point, and when I'm talking about argument point, it's with myself, because this is FOMOMOFO. I am the original FOMOMOFO, and I argue with myself, and I will dance around in circles all day long. I don't have any concerns when I buy a game, and I talked about this last week, and if you haven't listened last week, that's great. Welcome to the podcast. Love your work. Please join us. I have no compunction with buying a game and putting it on the shelf and looking at it and going, I'm probably only going to play that once every 2 years. I'm probably only going to play it once every 3 years. I'm in the camp of I'm a collector, not necessarily just a board game player. I have probably 20 games I've not played yet, and I have no problem with that, because I look at those on the shelf and I smile, because those are all first-time experiences waiting for me. I remember the first time I had Eggs Benedict. I was 9 years old. It changed my freaking life. I am an absolute whore for Eggs Benedict, and I remember the first time I had it. My mom was a restaurateur, and she took me out. She said, you should try this. And I sat down, and it came to the table, and it was these 2 beautifully wobbly, I don't want to get hypersexual, but these beautiful wobbly eggs on English muffins. It was like 1980. What was it? 1983, right? So back then it was on English muffin, not a beautiful sliced sourdough, with ham and hollandaise. And I was immediately besotted with this breakfast. I was so taken. And to this day, if I go to a restaurant and they've got Eggs Benedict, I don't care how shit it is, I need to order it. So these games on my shelf, these are firsts waiting to happen. I have no issue with that. Avalon the Riven Vale, I have no doubt that I would love playing it. I have absolutely no doubt. But the argument I'm having with this game is not will it get played enough. It's will it get played at all. And that's the challenge I'm facing, and I'm sure it would. I'm not trying to be overly negative because it's the kind of game like Cthulhu Wars or like the Castlebergy Special Edition that if you rock up to PlayCon or Board Game Day or whatever and you pull Avalon out and set it up, you're going to have 3 people sitting down faster than you can get the box lid off, and you're going to have a crowd watching because it is stunning. And I'm perfectly, if that's its place in my collection, I'm okay with that. I love Blood Rage. I love Ankh. These are games that Super Trooper has, and I love those games. And if we get Avalon to the table and go, look, this is really great. This is really good, and it's gorgeous, right? Because who doesn't love playing with toys? I mean, go look at the armies. Go look at the armies for this game. Like, done deal. And I'm going to hand on heart and say, I'm probably backing this. Just because it is sexy as fruitcake. Like, it looks amazing. And again, if it's the game that I take to Board Game Days and I put it out and that's the only time it plays, I'm kind of okay with that. But if it never gets played outside of that, it's, that's the question. Will it ever get played? I'm going to say yes, it's going to get played. I think if we played it at the table and went, it's great, Blood Rage is better, that's also okay. And it just gets relegated to we're going to PlayCon or we're going to the Board Game Day or we're going to whatever the case is, or, One Man Clapping Con is happening 3 years from now, and it becomes... Yeah, I'm okay with that. But those are the questions I'm asking. Avalon the Riven Vale, I think it's expensive, yes. I think the production looks amazing. I think the shipping is perfectly reasonable for what you're getting. Have a look. It's not a recommendation. I'm not saying you should get it. I'm saying I'm probably in on this. Moving over from Avalon to World Order. World Order. Hashtag Hegemony 2. Whew. I have Hegemony. I've played Hegemony once. We played Hegemony once, and around the table we all decided that we had to play Hegemony again without shifting factions. For those that don't know, Hegemony is basically, it's a hyper socio-political game. I think Hegemony is a triumph of a game. You've got the working class, you've got the capitalist class, you've got the state, and you've got the 4th faction. I can't remember. And they all play very differently, and they play thematically like you would expect them to in a socio-political game. And they've managed to do it without making it a yawn fest of, this is a socio-political game. By the way, you're the working class. Enjoy. Hegemony is superb. It's a great game. We are struggling to get everyone at the table for a second go because what we're trying to really do is get the same 4 people at the table to play the same 4 factions, which is what we'd all like to do. But we all have families. We all have lives. We all have these things called jobs, which get in the way of all the things we want to do. And look, let's all just be socialist. But then they take our board games away and redistribute them. So maybe not. Hegemony's great. Hegemony 2, look, I got to be honest, I haven't looked at the gameplay a lot. Largely because I look at Hegemony and I go, that is a great big whiz-bang game that I really, really enjoy, and I don't need competition for it on my table. I would love someone else in our game group to buy World Order, because it looks very different. You're basically vying superpowers. You've got China, Russia, the European Union, and the United States. And they've done really interesting things, like the United States are in economic decline at the start of the game, and Russia's playing silly buggers with everybody. The European Union's trying to juggle everyone, keep everyone happy, and it looks really clever. Here's the issue, and here's where the FOMOMOFO comes in. Okay, is that you've got a lot of people. When I say people, whenever I say people, I mean the people. I mean the influential people who know what a good game looks like, who understand, and when they say this game is great, they're not talking out of their backside. The game is great. They have played this game, and I'm not going to name names. There's at least 3 people I've sort of tuned into to think about this game and look at it, have said, I love Hegemony. I prefer World Order. Now, I haven't drilled down into their commentary as to why they prefer World Order, whether it's a simpler game, whether it's a cleaner game, whether it's a more realistic game. But, you know, FOMOMOFO hears that and you go, why? Why did you make a game better than the one you just made? Screw you! Look, I'm going to be okay. Hegemony 2, World Order, it's on crowdfunding now. It looks great. The production for Hegemony and World Order are excellent. It's got its own aesthetic. You know, the aesthetic of the board, the aesthetic of the pieces, the color scheme, and the art style. It's a really interesting setup, and it's an interesting looking game. The All-In Deluxe for Hegemony, at least these guys, they've been absolutely transparent. They go, you want the All-In Deluxe? It's $260. There it is. You don't have to get the All-In Deluxe. You can get the base game. You know, you can get the base game, play the base game. Whoop-de-doo. That's great. The All-In Deluxe is $260 and shipping is $40. And that puts shipping at basically 15% of the cost of the game. Very reasonable. As I've said before, what they're likely doing is they're hiding some of the cost of shipping inside the games. And I'm all for it because they can play their little marketing games with my lizard brain. And my lizard brain goes, ha, shipping's cheap. Great. I'm all in. That's great. Happy days. It'll probably be a no for me. But it's a no with regret because I look at this and I'm fairly confident this is going to be an exceptional game. I just don't need another sociopolitical, you know, World Order game on my shelf. And the third game we're going to talk about today in FOMOMOFO. Oof. We're actually going to talk about this game further in Voices in My Head, you know, because Voices in My Head, we're going to unpick some of the trials and tribulations of this sort of thing. The third game we're going to talk about is called Lands of Evershade. And I say that with a sigh because I'm really conflicted with this one. Lands of Evershade is the latest from Awakened Realms. It's on GameFound right now. It's been live for, 2 days. It's already at something like $947 million. And it looks great. It looks really great. I've watched some gameplay videos on this. The gameplay, this is a highly narrative, deeply RPG, sprawling game a la Tainted Grail and whatnot, but very, very different. The gameplay is very different. The initiative system is very different. The way you use your abilities is very different. And it looks like it's bringing something really quite unique to the table. It's also written by the same narrative author that did ISS Vanguard and Tainted Grail, which are probably two of the best campaign games I have played in my years. And it's not a lot of years, I'm going to be honest. I've only been in modern board gaming for about 3 years. But I played ISS Vanguard and Tainted Grail such that they went on the table and they literally stayed on the table until the campaign was done. Nothing else hit the table in the bunker until they were finished. It was 22, 23, 25 sessions, whatever it is. Not back to back, but I literally didn't play anything else. And the reason I enjoyed them so thoroughly was not just the gameplay. I mean, the gameplay was great. I was more a fan of Tainted Grail's gameplay with the card system than I was of ISS's dice system. And don't get me wrong, the dice system in ISS was excellent. I did find that the rinse-repeat sort of in the middle part of ISS Vanguard wore me just a little bit. There was probably scenario 14 through 17 where I was kind of like, oh. And luckily I pushed through and it picked up the pace and the pacing increased and the narrative increased. And it was a great experience. Tainted Grail, the pacing I loved, the narrative I loved. I got to the end of the game and I could have set it up and started again. It was that good for me. And I'm talking about Tainted Grail, Kings of Ruin, not Knights of Avalon. This was the most recent Tainted Grail. So the same writer that wrote both of those is doing the narrative for Lands of Evershade. And for me, that's like saying Stephen King's got a new book out. I'm like, here's my money. Just take it. Just take it. And Tainted Grail, I didn't go all in on Tainted Grail. I got the upgraded resources. I got the playmat. And the playmat was really nice and made playing a lot of fun. It was thematic. And other than the upgraded resources and the playmat and the sleeve box, because when you're talking about these big games with like 1,500 cards, you get the sleeve box from Awakened Realms, and it is always, always, always going to be better than trying to get third-party sleeves, largely because they also usually sell you a box that has individual storage components for each type of card. You can use that box to play the game. It's not just a ton of sleeves that you sleeve and shove back in the main box. And that's their go-to. I can't remember what I paid for Tainted Grail. I want to say it was probably 300 and a little bit Australian, and I'm going off memory because this was a while ago. I pledged for Tainted Grail probably well over 2 years ago. It was probably one of the first big campaigns I shelled out for when I was playing modern board games. Lands of Evershade, it looks amazing. I'm not going to lie. And this is the all-in for Lands of Evershade. And look, the all-in has everything. I would never be an all-in on one of these things, because the all-ins for these things are gargantuan beasts with non-gameplay related things like art books and extra dice trays and all that sort of stuff. But the all-in for Lands of Evershade with split shipping is around $700 Australian. Just let that sink in for a minute. $700. Split shipping's $110. So it's like $580 or something, and then it's $110 for shipping. And look, if I'm going on my shipping matrix of do I, don't I, that's roughly around sort of the 18-19% mark. To be honest, I think for a game of this size, and if you go all in, this is a really big box of game. I don't think the shipping's unreasonable. But $700 buys me a lot of board games. Like, it really does. It really does. The core game, just the core box, is $180, and the shipping for that is $52. So you're talking about $230. I'm talking the special edition, not the standee version, because I wouldn't, if you want the standee version, I know plenty of people prefer the standee version. That's not me. The deluxe version has a few more extra things. It's got, the player inserts and game trays. It's got, I think there's actually triple layered player boards and whatnot. So just the base game is going to be $230. And I actually think it's probably worth $230. I have no issue with that. There are 2 extra mini campaigns. And so I guess let me just say, Lands of Evershade, rather than a big 80-hour game, is broken into 3 chapters, and each chapter is basically 5 3-hour sessions each. And you can just play the chapter. You don't have to play chapter 1, then chapter 2, then chapter 3. You don't have to do that. You can go, well, I want to play chapter 3, and you're going to play chapter 3. And I'm reasonably confident that the replayability of chapter 3 is going to be quite high, because there are 6 classes and 6 races before you kick off. That's going to give you a unique starting point, and then each class has 2 branching stories that they can go into. So I actually think the replayability in this is going to be exceptional, and I really like this model of the 3 mini campaigns. Betrayal of the Second Era has done the same thing. When that comes out, each campaign is broken down into 3 sort of stages, and Betrayal of the Second Era, they're saying it's about 12 hours per stage. And I really like that, because you can play that, you can pack it up, you can put it away, you can go back to it a few weeks later and pick it up and keep going. And you've got kind of a mini conclusion between each one. Here's where FOMOMOFO kicks in, though. On top of those 3 campaigns, they've got, right from the get-go, they've got 2 more chapters that you can buy. I'm not going to lie, I think they're $30 US each, so $45 Australian, and that's going to buy you another 15 hours of gameplay. I think that's great, because, you can then grab some more. And here's where I'm sitting with this one, because when I bought Tainted Grail, I got everything you could get. I got everything you could get from a gameplay point of view, and then I grabbed the upgraded resources. And to be honest, the upgraded resources were fine. They weren't any better or worse than the tokens that came with the game, though. And so I don't have regret. They were $30. They were what they were. They were fine. If I want just the gameplay version, as in just the gameplay component for this, it's currently $180, and then it's 2 more chapters at, say, $45 each. That's okay. I'm actually okay with that. We're going to talk about this more in Voices in My Head, though, because I know that Awakened Realms isn't done. Okay, I've backed to Awakened Realms more than once before. This is day 2 of the campaign. By the end of the campaign, there's going to be 5 more things to buy that are gameplay related. And we'll see. We'll see where I tap out, because as I'm sitting literally right now, my thoughts are, I'm just going to take the core box. Because the core box comes with all stretch goals. That's all the unique stuff. The extra chapters, I'm confident I'm going to be able to get those further down the track. And it's not that I don't want to pay for them now. Yes, they'll probably be more expensive later. And again, we're going to touch on this more in Voices in My Head next, but it's Christmas in 5 weeks, basically. And there's campaign after campaign after campaign. And if you love games, it's a really hard time. You've got all these games that, and you can be guaranteed that they're going to go to reprint. But it's tough. It's tough. So where I'm sitting currently with this is probably core box in the sleeve box, The sleeve box is another $39. It's going to be core box and the sleeve box with a view to maybe picking everything up later on. Lands of Evershade. It looks fantastic. And coming next week to watch, we've got Revenant from Mind Clash Games and Vestige from Orange Nebula. Vestige is a rethink. It's not a reskin, it's kind of a redevelopment of Vindications. Now, I haven't played Vindications, but a lot of people love Vindications, so they're ones to watch next week. And that'll do it for FOMOMOFO.
Voices in my head, I'm talking to myself. What board game should I get down off the shelf? What should we do? What game should we play? What steel and wood will use workers to pay? Voices in my head, it's just
This week in Voices in My Head, we are discussing the pain of the Uber campaign. And it leads on really nicely from Lands of Evershade, guys. And in this, I'm talking about the multi-million-dollar hype trains, which often deliver. They often deliver on the hype. They sometimes don't. While this is kind of squarely aimed at the likes of Simon and Awaken Realms, because this is what they do, this is their business model, it's the Uber campaigns. To a lesser extent, it includes publishers like Mind Clash and Chip Theory Games, and even publishers who are relatively independent and niche, who get literally crushed under the weight of their own success, like Shadowborn Games of the aforementioned Avalon the Riven Vale. Shadowborn Games released a game that was almost universally loved by everyone that bought it, that being Oathsworn. And so now, they've got their own, even if it's unintended hype train feeding their current crowdfunding campaign. And let me be clear, this is not a dig or it's not even a complaint. It's not an insult to these companies. I just want to do some running commentary on my thoughts on this, because I am the audience for these things. These guys know their audience. Then they know how to play us like a fiddle. And if you've been into crowdfunding or board games, you know how it works. Let's talk about Lands of Evershade. Lands of Evershade was announced 6 or 7 months ago. I think it had 40,000 followers on its campaign before it went live. There were ads after ads after ads on Facebook and Instagram, emails. Get ready, here it's coming. Get ready, here it's coming. And it launches. They hit their funding goal in 1 minute and 4 seconds or something. And I mean, yes, their funding goal was 10% to 4% of what they'll eventually get. But it wasn't like they set their funding goal at $17,000. Their funding goal was at something like $125,000. They hit their funding goal in 1 minute. Because all the FOMO mofos out there like me are like, I woke up, it's 5 a.m. Eastern Australia time. This campaign's been live for 4 minutes. Probably 4 hours at that point. I don't know. We're in a different world over here. And yep, hey, Lands of Evershade. It's not that it was an insta-back for me, but I'm on the hype train. This is going to be a game that is right in my wheelhouse. They announced their pre-release pricing, a core box of only $120. They announced this like 6 weeks ago. Sounds great. And it's true. Their basic box is the deluxe is $120, or their special edition is $120. It's perfectly reasonable. And the positive side of that is that's accessible for most people. Maybe not everyone. That's $120 US. I'm normally talking Aussie, so that's why earlier I was talking about Lands of Evershade being $180. That's for a game of this size and this genre, for gamers who play these games. We look at that and go, that's perfectly reasonable. And if you just buy that, that gives you what I would actually call a taste of the game, because you're going to be missing a lot of gameplay. And for some people, it's enough. Some people get to the 45-hour mark and they go, I'm done. I don't need any more. And that's fine too. As I mentioned in FOMOMOFO, I will probably be taking the base game on this campaign, as in the core box and the sleeve box, because usually all the other stuff, and I'm not talking about fancy resources and whatnot, because guaranteed they're coming out sometime in the campaign, they're going to be available on Amazon, 6 months after the game's released, kind of thing. But this style of pricing, in the way they go, well, here's the deluxe, the special edition, it's $120. It literally is like piping FOMO into my jugular, because it's like, well, that's quite reasonable. Well, let's go now. What's another $29 for a whole chapter? $29 is 15 hours of gameplay. I can look at games on my shelf and go, well, I paid $100 for that game. I haven't played that game for 15 hours. So $29, oh, that's reasonable. Tick. Here's another chapter. It's another 15 hours. Well, that's a perfectly reasonable ask. Tick. Great. The sleeve box. Sleeve box includes the core game and all the stretch goals. Tick, that's $39. And I know the sleeve boxes are great. That's great. In 3 weeks' time, there's going to be another sleeve box that includes all the extra chapters. And that one's going to be $70. And I've been buying games from Awaken Realms for 2.5 years. I know how it goes. And this is how it is such a clever way. To be honest, I mean, you could never go, hey, here's a game. We want you to buy this game. And it's got all these parts, and it's got the sleeves, and it's got the resources, it's got the metal coins, it's got the cloth drawbags, it's got the little booklet, it's got the leather bound, it's got the art book. It's $743. And we go, wait, you are mad. I'm not giving you $743. But what they do is they go, hey, give us $120. We go, yeah, I'll give you $120. No problem. I'll give you $120. And they go, hey, how about an extra $29 3 days later? Well, yeah, cool. Here's another $29. Oh, we got these, and go look at the metal coins for Lands of Evershade. I don't need more freaking metal coins, but go look at them. They're nice metal coins. Here's some metal coins. They're $30. Hey, reasonable. Metal coins, $30. Yep. Here's another chapter, $29. Yep. I'm in. Look, because they do this every 3 days, every 4 days. Here's the sleeve box if you're getting everything. Oh, am I getting everything? And I look back and I go, oh, I actually am now. I am getting everything. Oh, well, I better change my sleeve box. I'll get the sleeve box for everything. Oh, yep, no problem. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. And then 4 days out from the end of the campaign, like clockwork, they go, hey, here's an extra couple of things and our new all-in pledge. And the new all-in pledge will be, I'm talking Australian funds, it'll be $470. And I'll go, $470 for the all-in? And then I'll go look at my pledge and I realize my pledge is at $448. I'm like, far out. Sorry, I almost said a bad word there. I can swear once in a while. I try to keep it to a minimum, kids. But I got a Farquad. I pledged $448 for this game. Well, the all-in gets these extra two things. And and that's how they work. It is absolutely brilliant. And it's like being a heroin dealer, because every time you add something to your pledge every 3 days, you get that dopamine bing, 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 bing in your brain. And you are just, it's like great. And then the campaign ends and there's no more dopamine. There's no more FOMO dopamine. You're excited. The game's coming sometime between 8 and 800 months. You know, and to be honest, Awaken Realms is pretty good at their business model. No one delivers on time, but they're pretty close. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying this is the situation with these Uber campaigns. Luckily, a lot of these campaigns, they use GameFund, which allows you to use stretch pay. And this particular campaign allows you to stretch pay over 7 months. But when you look at stretch pay over 7 months on the all-in, you're still looking at $100 a month. Stretch pay over 7 months, I think when I got the Castles of Burgundy all-in, my stretch pay was $40 a month. And I think, to be honest, they put that over 10 months. It was great. $40 a month, I'm like, well, okay, I don't have a coffee a couple of times, and, $40 a month's only $10 a week. You can justify that. $100 a month is starting to get into the realm of, what am I doing with my life? And to be honest, I will probably be in on Lands of Evershade. But as I mentioned in FOMOMOFO, I'm leaning more now towards the special edition box and the sleeve box. I will be looking at the gameplay all in. Potentially, depending on how far they go with it. But really, that's it. And I look back, and we've talked about Shadowborn with Avalon, and next week we've got another one coming from Mind Clash. Mind Clash is going to have Revenant coming out next week. And blessedly, Mind Clash they're not known for and now. It's one of the things I do like about Mind Clash is that they tend to run a hype train for 3 months, and then it just goes ballistic. And there'll be a few stretch goals. There'll be pre-planned stretch goals. There won't be anything in there that they don't already know about or haven't planned to include in the end box. But it makes it exciting. But the hype train that they've run means that Revenant will probably hit $1 million on day one kind of thing, or day two. I'm looking forward to looking at it. I am not convinced that I need a Voidfall themed worker placement game, but the board has a lot of Battlestar vibes, and so I'll be looking at it very closely. I think Mind Clash has a history of doing things reasonably, I won't say affordably, but in a band that makes sense. They still use the hype train, and so they should. This is their business. But let's talk about Simon. Simon's another one that uses this model, this hyper FOMO model of, here's what we're doing, and every 2-3 weeks or 2-3 days, here's another one. And I'll talk about the Deceased campaign that ran, I don't know, 6 months ago, 7 months ago. I'm a mad DC fan, right? You know, you're either DC or Marvel. Super Troopers Marvel. I'm DC. I really like Marvel. I love DC. And so Deceased, which is a Zombicide version of DC, I've not ever been a mad Zombicide fan. I have played Zombicide. I like Zombicide. It's light. It's not too thinky. You know, I'll be likely playing most of this game solo 4-handed, and you can do that. It's like when I play Cthulhu Death May Die. I can play it solo 2, 3, 4-handed. You can manage that quite happily. Deceased came out. Here's the core box. It's $88. Ooh, that's great. No problem. 3 days later, here's the Gotham Knights one. The Gotham Knights one, it's actually another $70. Well, I can't play without, you know, Nightwing and Bane, right? You put Nightwing and Bane in a DC game, and it's like, well, I don't care. I don't care what you're charging. And then 5 days later, it's the Arkham Asylum box. You know, you got the Riddler, and you got the Joker and Harley Quinn, and the Penguin, and if you take this level of it, you get little Riddler cubes, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. They launch with a $110 game, and you go, yep, and the stretch goals. Let's talk about the stretch goals for Simon. You know, they know their business. They're Marvel United. They're DC United. The stretch goals are, there was an extra 50 characters in the stretch goal box. The main box had 12 characters in it. The stretch goal box had 50 characters. So really, that core pledge for Deceased is cheap. But if you love DC, you gotta have the Arkham Asylum box. You've gotta have the Gotham Knights box. I'm not even a Green Lantern fan. The Green Lantern box, I'm like, the minis all have like green glass bits. It like, yes, I'm not a Lantern fan. I need the Lantern box, right? I need the Lantern box. I've got to have it. You know, the Undead Gods box. Okay, give me the Undead Gods box, and to the point where at the end I realized that what I pledged was more expensive than the Omega pledge, which was that basically they're all in, and so they got me. They got me. They got me with this Uber campaign. And when I talk about the pain of the Uber campaign, again, we talk a lot about first world problems on OMC. You know, the pain of the Uber campaign is one of, I feel a little bit like I'm being milked. Now, I'm a happy cow, squeeze away, because I'm getting something I want in the end. And I guess as gamers, we look at this, we know what's going on. You know, it's kind of like being in a manipulative relationship. You know, you know what's going on, you know, and you are doing it anyway because there's stuff in it for you. And I am not undercooking manipulative relationships. Those of you that are in manipulative relationships, you have my condolences. It's a horrible place to be. I know first-handedly. Thank you very much. But it's a game. It's a metaphor. And it's one of those things that, for me, I am blessed in that at this stage of my life, I have a rather robust amount of disposable income. I am very, very lucky. And I know I'm lucky. I'm not kidding myself any day of the week. My head's not in the sand. For me to go and take Lands of Evershade for, you know, the $300 or $400, it's not going to hurt me in any way. It's for me, as somebody who is so in love with this hobby, it's that balancing act of, well, I've got Lands of Evershade that's out. I've got Avalon the Riven Vale that's out. Revenant's coming out next week, and Vestige, and I'm probably not going to end up backing out of those, so it's no big deal. But the week after that, Enormity is out. And Enormity, as I said, is basically ATO maybe meets Nemesis. And oh my sweet baby jeebus. Like that, ooh, I've not ever backed a Nemesis game, largely because the deep luck component, you know, I very nearly backed the last Nemesis game. I was right on the knife's edge of the FOMO with that one. I looked at it, went, oh, it looks so good. I'm Gen X. Like, we grew up, we were breastfeeding off xenomorphs when we were like 9 years old, right? Like, oh my God. If Enormity can tick that box but have a little more guts to it, a little more determinism in it, and a little more capability, I can tell you right now, like, I am going to jump into that FOMO hole, you know, without a parachute, screaming Geronimo all the way to the bottom, just making it rain with my money until I hit the bottom. And that's the issue for me. When I talk about the pain of the Uber campaign, there are, we've got Lands of Evershade out right now, and we've got a Normandy out in 2 weeks, and we've got, Avalon the Riven Vale, which isn't hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But when it all adds up, 5 weeks from Christmas, I have 3 daughters who I love very much most days. That pain is that scales of justice. Well, where am I going to put my dollars? And I get adulthood's all about choices. You've got to choose. Do you want X? Do you want Y? Do you want X? Do you want Y? And the way they squeeze our balls on this one is with all the exclusives. All the exclusives that come out. The crowdfunding exclusives. If you don't get this now, you're missing out on everything behind the curtain. La, la, la. And I'm not going to say it sucks. But as an adult who has to make those kinds of decisions, do I want Lands of Evershade or do I want my family to eat for a week and a half? Okay, get the groceries. Again, first world problems. And I guess what I want to circle back to is if these campaigns were more transparent, I can meaningfully put hand on heart and say they would probably only sell 2/3 of the games. Because the way they managed to get $10.5 million is by this trickle feed economics. But if they were more transparent up front, it would be a lot easier for us to say no. And I get that's not in their interest. But you can't tell me that selling $6 million worth of a game versus $10 million worth of a game isn't still going to be a fantastically positive outcome for the company. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the small independent and niche developers and publishers like Druid City, who, it's a team of 3 or 5, whatever the case is. Awaken Realms has a team of like 9.6 thousand people. They don't, but they have a large team. These guys own a large share of GameFound itself. They're a large company. And I can see a point in our future where this Ouroboros, or snake eating its tail of this sort of FOMO cycle is going to actually cause, I'll use the term economic collapse in board games. And by economic collapse, I mean where people just get to a threshold where they're like, enough's enough. I cannot, I gave you $1,000 last year. I'm on a lot of forums on Facebook, and I know a lot of people, they do this very thing. They're like, I gave Awaken Realms $1,000 over the last 2 years. I can't do this again. There's going to come a time where this comes full circle, and I absolutely believe this, where game publishers are going to discover that, particularly post-COVID, our dear friends in the US are about to suffer gargantuan tariffs on these sorts of things, which have the potential to double the cost of these games they're buying. You've got VAT in Europe. We're very lucky in Australia that we don't pay excess taxes on things if they come in here and they're counter-shipped or they're on-shipped from spaces here in Australia. But the world is changing. And the cost of getting these things is going to get to a point where it supersedes our threshold of tolerance for our return on investment. And this level of games are going to become quite elitist. They're going to become accessible only by those who have extensive disposable income. And developers and publishers, and again, I'm talking about these top tier, and I'm not talking about tier and quality, I'm talking top tier for volume of output. The Simons and the Awakened Realms of the world are going to have to possibly, I'm no Nostradamus, but are going to have to possibly look at their model and go, okay, this isn't working. So now we have to circle back to where we were in 2006 and create games that are both amazing, but are also accessible. And because the FOMO is that button is that button in our brain, and that lizard brain is going to become numb eventually. And I can feel it starting with me. Not that it's becoming numb, but my lizard brain's starting to go, is this a good idea, Hammers? Do you really want, I'm all for having a game that's $400. And it said, even if it only gets played once a year, like Avalon the Riven Vale, I am probably in on this for 250-ish kind of thing. And it will be the game that, Super Trooper rocks up to every game con or every game day, and the first thing he puts those Cthulhu Wars, and there's a crowd. It's that kind of game. And I'm okay with that. I would prefer it's the kind of game that gets played more often. If you're listening, Game Root, we're talking about Arcs, the Blighted Reach campaign. I can see myself in another year or two hitting a threshold where I just go, enough's enough. And it's going to have to be very highly justified on yet another one of these, you know. And I've got to be completely transparent. I love a narrative campaign, particularly when the narrative is so gut-wrenchingly written, like it was for Tainted Grail and ISS, where it sucks you in, and the story is, it's not that it's better than the gameplay, but it is holding its own, you know, fist pumps above your head, one fist bump for gameplay, one fist bump for the narrative. That's an experience. And when I talk about my shelf of shame, and I've got firsts over there, I know some of those firsts aren't all going to be AAA experiences, but they're still going to be firsts, right? They're still going to be firsts. But I can see a threshold coming, and I can see an event horizon coming in the gaming where this runs its course, and everyone's going to have to pivot and flex. And the guys like Druid City, the guys at that level who are doing, you know, sometimes still expensive games, but they're doing games that are accessible. And if you don't get them during the campaign, you might not get them at all. That's really what crowdfunding's for. And I guess I ask the question is, do these Uber campaigns, do they do good things for our beloved hobby? Or do they make other lesser campaigns? And I'll hark back to March for the Ants by Tim Eisner. I didn't end up backing March for the Ants, not because I didn't really love the idea, eclipse Dawn for the Galaxy with ants, but because it just wasn't enough. I looked at that game and I thought, for the price, it's not enough for me. And I think that's a disservice. And I can look at that with self-awareness and say, should I back that? Because if I don't support those sorts of games, they're going to die. And all we're going to be left with is the great big bulldozers that just steamroll through. I don't know. It's not a complaint. It's really not. It's just some musings on this is the world we're in. These are the decisions we got to make as lovers of the hobby. Anyway, that'll do it for Voices in My Head. Now we're going to give someone the clap. All right, so saddle up. This could be quite polarizing for my 7 listeners, depending where you're listening, and I'm not even sorry. But the clap this week goes to Donald Trump. And the reason for that is Donald Trump has taught my kids that bullies really can win. It's been a delightful time getting to explain that to my children for the second time. I did it 4 years ago. But here we are, Donald Trump, bullies win. So here you go, Donald. Here's a clap for the notion that bullies can win. Good on you. And if you're a Donald Trump supporter, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. It's one of those things. I don't live in the States, but I think we're going to be feeling the socioeconomic ripples of this for a long time to come. Not to bring it down, but oh man, what a time. And that concludes this week's bubbling cauldron of first world problems. Tune in next week for I don't know what, because I make this shit up as I go along. You can reach us on all the socials. Find us on Facebook by searching One Man Clapping. Email onemanclapping, WONmanclapping @gmail.com. We're on Instagram at @1manclapping. You can join the One Man Clapping Guild on BGG. Subscribe to Guild 4426. And there's nothing there. I don't know when something's going to be there. But do subscribe. Costs you nothing. A couple of clicks. And one day, we will be there. Thank you as always for your time. Rambling into the mic for your listening pleasure is cheaper than therapy, better than smashing my pinky on the furniture, and a whole lot of one-way catharsis. I appreciate you. This episode was brought to you by Sugar-Free V, the energy drink that tastes the least shit so I can get through the day and get a game to the table in the evening. V, the least shit energy drink. Until next time, get your game on, even if you've got to play with yourself. And remember, if they can't find you, they can't stop you. Find your happy place and lock the door. Peace out, mofos.
Locked in the bunker, shadows shake. One man clapping secrets awake. Board games living, dice they break. Echoes pounding, hearts they quake.
In the bunker, board games rolling. One man clapping, stories growing. Hard rock thunder, speakers blowing. Clapping loud, the unknown.
Ugh, seriously.